In the mid-20th century, visionary filmmaker George Lucas crossed paths with the teachings of Joseph Campbell, a scholar who mapped out the primordial space in which mythology operates within culture. This collision of Campbell's hero's journey and Lucas's pop culture vision resulted in Star Wars. The shockwaves of this space fantasy have influenced culture for half a century, while Campbell's works have become law in storytelling. But the question begs to be asked, are we also reaching the end of our cultural hero's journey and ready to move on to something beyond Campbell's model?
The main character is a hero or a heroine. That is to say, someone who has found or achieved or done something beyond the normal range of achievement and experience. Someone who has given his life to something bigger than himself.
This is The Breakdown. In 1949, Joseph Campbell released The Hero with a Thousand Faces. The work set out to prove the common underlying structure within all myths and religions of the world, and how all stories, from Gilgamesh to Osiris, to Buddha, to Rama, to Jesus of Nazareth, are all expressions of the same story pattern, which he coined the hero's journey, or monomyth. A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. It's called to adventure out of the known world into the unknown, where obstacle and adversity lead to revelation and spiritual transformation. Fabulous forces are there encountered and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. A going and a return, a death and a resurrection. Look across our most legendary stories, and you will find this age-old cycle play out. From Homer to Herbert, Wizard of Oz to the Wachowskis, the hero's journey is our most universal story schema and arguably most important myth to pass through our roots.
Myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life.
The monomyth clinches us so significantly because it contemplates forces of human experience beyond material reality.
We use myth as a way to make sense of the unexplainable forces at play in our world. And perhaps through the generational retelling and reinvention of the hero's journey, we get closer to wrapping our heads around the confounding mysteries of consciousness and existence.
You must learn the ways of the Force.
We're storytelling creatures. Mythology is an instinct of ours, not simply daydreams and machination. These are primordial tools for conveying our fundamental wisdoms. Thus, the hero's journey serves as an inherent quality of human being. It's part of who we are. Plot transmits code, characters serve as archetypes. Campbell suggests our bond with the hero's journey is biological, hardwired into our subconscious DNA. It's dominion beyond our control. Heavily influenced by psychoanalyst Carl Jung, Campbell saw the monomyth arise from Jung's psychoid level of reality, the abstract bridge outside of time and space from which all thought and concepts spring. It seems to me probable that the real nature of the archetype is not capable of being made conscious, that it is transcendent, on which account I call it psychoid. Carl Jung. CJ if you're nasty. Stories are important, and we want importance in our stories. We want to experience something beyond the normal range of being. We want to grasp an ideal, seize the courage to discover who we are and who we want to be. In our stories is the code to a life worth living.
Why are there so many stories of the hero or of heroes?
Well, because that's what's worth writing about.
I had studied Joe Campbell, I continue to study Joe Campbell, and I really tried to take these psychological motifs from mythology all over the world. As a result, I was able to take ideas that go through all societies, through all the ages, and bring them down and put them into a razzle-dazzle Saturday matinee serial action-adventure film.
In 1977, George Lucas delivered A New Hope to the world, and the ground shook. In Star Wars was an entirely new universe of existence and natural law that resonated with us at a deep level. In less adept hands, we would have had a gauche space fantasy swashbuckle. But because of his masterful use of Campbell's tools, Lucas wound up erecting a massive pop culture monolith that grows eternal. And honestly, just thinking about Star Wars has erected my massive pop culture monolith.
One of the wonderful things I think about this adventure into space is that the artist, the one thinking up the story, is in a field that is not covered by our own knowledges. Much of the adventure in the old stories is where they go into regions that no one's been in before, Well, we've now conquered the planet, so there are no empty spaces for the imagination to go forth and fight its own war. There's a whole new realm for the imagination to open out and live its forms.
This was more than a blockbuster. This was true mythology and personification of the hero's journey. Lucas was using archetypes to explore themes of cosmic gnosis, generational pathology, and regeneration. A young boy leaves the known world and initiates into the hidden mysteries of the unknown, goes through a spiritual death, and emerges out of the abyss transformed into a higher state of consciousness.
You see, this thing up here, this consciousness thinks it's running the shop. It's a secondary organ of a total human being, and it must not put itself in control. It must submit and serve the humanity of the body. When it does put itself in control, you get this father, the man who's gone over to the intellectual side.
I put the Force into the movies in order to try to awaken a certain kind of spirituality in young people. More a belief in God than a belief in any particular, religious system.
Though not as profoundly eternal as, say, the Upanishads or Torah, Star Wars has undeniably connected with the world on a spiritual scale. The Force is downright religion to fans, and Star Wars has been elevated into an archetype of storytelling in its own right. But that wasn't always the case. Initially, Lucas's script was rejected all over town, and now it had bent the Hollywood system to its will. Campbell's hero finds the courage to discover who they are and who they want to be, slays the dragon of the ego, and follows their bliss to the truth of their life. And Hollywood adopted the hero's journey, imbuing Campbell's formula to film and television over and over again, doing what it's supposed to be doing, presenting us with the war between light and dark and the preservation of ideal, letting us touch the eternal and experience the rapture of being alive. And Star Wars continued. We've witnessed the Skywalker Chronicle cycle through 3 generations of Campbellian trilogy. After decades of profound spectacle, we are nearing the end of Lucas's original vision and crossing into the dawn of a new day of the Star Wars universe. What will that day bring? What is the next legend from long ago in a galaxy far away? It can't just be the same themes with new names. We need Star Wars to evolve as culture has. If the Skywalker cycle is the known world that we must leave behind, what story is hiding in the unknown? Is Campbell even the right guide from here? If the hero's journey is fused to our genetic makeup, aren't we to play out the monomyth of our own lives? Campbell decries that the hero must go through a death and rebirth to transcend. The end of the Skywalker saga may be implicating more than we realized about the state of storytelling as a whole. Star Wars captivated us because it triggered what was fundamentally meaningful to culture and storytelling at the time. But what is meaningful to us in the modern world? Is Campbell the pinnacle or just one act of our own living myth? Is our own hero's journey the conscious shift past the archaic formula of the hero's journey itself?
So the hero evolves over time.
Well, he evolves as the culture evolves. Departure, fulfillment, return.
Humankind is experiencing a massive shift in global consciousness through technology. Through the internet, we are evolving as a species in ways which no one could have ever predicted. To our ancient ancestors, the virtual online world would be seen as a realm of magic, and us, its godlike sorcerers. What we have with the digital age offers us something beyond biology and the potential for a whole new field of mythology. On the verge of space colonization, we're on the cusp of a whole new distinction between human and earthling. We're about to find the exit out of our own primordial caste. How can Campbell, who passed away in 1987, possibly guide us through this era? Consider this. The hero's journey is selfish. It's a form which celebrates the narcissistic pursuit. Do we still see ourselves in these characters anymore? Is the hero's journey something to aspire to? Or an underlying problem with our worldview that keeps us from uniting? What is our desire for stories that center around the needy individual? What has really been exchanged in return for the hero's self-actualization? Look at Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, the modern cinematic retelling of America's paragonic savior and ultimate hero archetype, Superman. Snyder, a devotee of Campbell, focused Kal-El through a glorious lens of self-realization and the call to the code of justice. But all the intention backfired by the third act climax as Superman battles Zod. Obliged to save the world from the alien overlord and exact vengeance for the death of his Krypton, Superman carves a path of destruction through Metropolis, killing thousands of innocent civilians. Who did Superman actually save by the end? His girlfriend. Audiences were appalled.
You know, they say it's all downhill after the first kiss.
What would have once been seen as the ultimate act of heroic valor was now viewed as myopic pursuit. Superman was exposed as some executioner golem, and the audience turned on him. Look at San Andreas. Even in stories where the hero saves a proverbial village, it's treated as second-tier to the deficient ego, and often comes at the cost of far too many lives. This is the inherent flaw of the hero's journey. The community's well-being is only considered if it's in service to the personal quest. We have somehow locked ourselves into the narrative of this formula, convinced that the hero's journey is the only way in which we can relate to a protagonist. Even the notion that a story must have a hero is something we're unwilling to let go of as audiences. We're grappling with a millennia of biological and tribal programming. How can we tell meaningful stories without the mythological formulas?
You can't predict what a myth is going to be any more than you can predict what you're going to dream tonight. Myths and dreams come from the same place. They come from realizations of some kind that have then to find expression in symbolic form.
In heaven.
There are vanguard storytellers who operate from the subconscious level and portray archetypes who don't conform to Campbell. Kenneth Anger, David Lynch, Kubrick, the list goes on. Truly gripping for the brave, but lack mass meaning to pop culture. It pains us to accept, but so true. As far out into the cerebral boundaries as these artists have taken us, we never return with full understanding of where we've gone or why we were there in the first place.
The only myth that's going to be worth thinking about in the immediate future is one that's talking about the planet, not this city, not these people, but the planet and everybody on it.
Looking at the mass appeal of the Avengers and the shared universe model that Marvel revolutionized, maybe a focus on the collective needs offers a transcendence way greater than we could ever attain on our own. We aren't saying the MCU isn't immune to the monomyth. This phase has primarily been Tony Stark's hero's journey, but there is somewhat of a primal instinct of the MCU that promotes the growth of our species as a whole. While the superhero genre has potential to transcend Campbell, its very nature is so indebted to Campbell that it has only been able to reach post-modernistic commentary with the rise of the anti-hero. It's impossible to collectively agree on a new monomyth. It must spring from somewhere in the deep recesses of our collective unconscious. It's born from our traumas and innermost strife. We're not autonomous in the creation of our archetypes. We don't have ideas, ideas have us. So while we're stuck with these forces, our relationship to these archetypes needs a massive rewiring. It may be that we must work on the wounds of our own psyche before this sea change can take place. A recalibration of our collective values must be engaged before our new allegory can evolve. It's not enough just to replace the hero's journey. It must mean something to us. We can't just write a new story. The new story has to write us. So if we want our stories to evolve, we must evolve. Everybody, call a therapist, pronto. Let's get well together.
Myths help you to have your own hero's journey, find your individuality, find your place in the world, but hopefully remind you that you're part of a whole and that you must also be part of the community and think of the welfare of the community above the welfare of yourself.
We're accepting term papers on the Campbellian structure of this essay. Boy, it sure is difficult to think of a world without Campbellian storytelling techniques, almost as hard as it is to find a cheeky sign-off to this essay. But that'll do. Thanks for watching. This is The Breakdown.